No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He
you
a
can't work
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I'm creating another tier list for the supports at the World Championship. So just like the last video, it's important to understand what I'm ranking, because like if you're looking for somebody to rank everything based off of how their team's going to perform at Worlds, then you basically just rank the teams in terms of how they're expected to do at Worlds. So that's not interesting for anybody. I'm more interested in the talent of the individual players, and I think for a support player, the main way to gauge talent is by their ability to create plays for their team, diverse champion pool, and it all comes down to the ability to contribute to the winning difference. And it's different for every role, but for a support, a lot of that means just having a strong landing phase, being able to go even when you're supposed to go even, losing gracefully when you're supposed to lose a matchup, like for a period of the game, not for the entire game, and also being able to get your team, like specifically your AD carry, into their power spikes, and roaming, vision control. But a lot of these things are difficult to quantify for supports because so much of it is tied to team success for supports. And that's really ultimately why I think playmaking is the main thing that I focus on. So let's take a look at the list. And I think that it only makes sense to rank them this close because, like I said, it's so dependent on the team's ability to play. And in this meta specifically, team success is connected to the jungle and the mid lane. Like, not only that, but it starts there. So, like, if you were thinking about winning chances created by your teammates, it'd be like probably 30% jungle, 30% mid lane, 20% AD carry, 10% top lane, 10% support, or like some distribution for those last three. But it's really the mid and the jungle that take on the brunt of the responsibility to keep the game close so you can fight at these objectives. I don't know if it's fair to say the worst supports at World, but basically this B tier are players that I think will not be the reason their team is successful at the World Championship if their team is successful. Like, Treats isn't even the starter on his own team right now. I think Biofrost will eventually be the starter. Oh, and I guess we should also mention the most important champions for supports right now. I think Bard is by far the most important champion for supports right now. I don't think that's debatable. But I'm sure there will be people out there who disagree with me. But for myself, that's going to play a factor in this. So if you're wondering why some of these Bard players are so highly ranked, that's why. So Treats is not a Bard player. Biofrost is the Bard player. Treats was not able to keep the starting position for TSM because Biofrost is better at Rakan and better at Bard, which are two champions TSM placed a high value on. Vander is an okay player overall. I don't think that Vander is making his team lose. I just don't think that he can make up for the deficiencies that I see in the mid-jungle duo in most of their matchups. I do think that Rogue, like, their team is built the way that it's supposed to be for this meta, but other teams are just better at doing it. The fact that they are built correctly, though, means that as long as they do pick ban correctly, they should be in a lot of close games. But I just believe talent eventually shines through, and I don't believe in Rogue's talent at the World's level. Next up, we have Koala. Koala is the support for Machi. I don't think that Machi is going to do very well. In the group stage, in terms of champion pool, it's a generic champion pool. It does play a decent amount of Bard, but it's difficult to take the win rates from this league and compare them to others. It's really difficult to do that for any position, really. And the support champion pool is so generic across regions that you're really not going to find many unique champions for support players, because they're often blind picked and you want the consistency out of your bot lane. Next up, we have Mark. Mark went from DMO to LGD. LGD played much better this split, due in large part to Longshi and Mark and Xie. So they did a lot to revamp their roster, and they quickly gelled. But again, we see a lot of the same champions. We do see Lux. Lux Caitlyn is pretty good. Lux Sona is pretty good. But I'm not sure LGD is really going to play that style. I think that Peanut and Xie are the two players who are tasked with creating the winning difference on their team, and everybody else just kind of plays around them. So, like, the best version of Mark is the version of Mark that listens to his team very well and helps establish vision control around objectives and lets Peanut do Peanut things. Then we have Biofrost, like I said before. Rakan and Bard are two of Biofrost's best champions. I just think that if TSM didn't really trust Biofrost at any point in this season, it makes me skeptical of the talent level, because I mean, as a support, has bounced around a few times, hasn't shown to any team in particular that they are a difference maker, and I think that's what helps explain his move from team to team. Hylissang, I felt like this was a tough one to rank, because I do think that Hylissang, he plays the game very similar to Afromu in my mind, where even when they are losing, they are willing to put themselves out on a limb to try to make a play to get their team back in the game. So Hylissang was very close to getting into the A tier. It's you're splitting hairs between A and B, really. So that's where I came out. I think that Fnatic, because of how well Fnatic's going to do, which I don't think they will do very well at this championship, I think it will eventually make people feel disappointed in Hylissang and Reckless specifically, because they're two of the players with the most experience on Fnatic, and people have high hopes for them. Yuyanjia, I think that Yuyanjia is one of the only question marks for top esports, and if they fail, Yuyanjia will get a lot of the blame. Probably not deserving of all of the blame, but it will be because other teams are targeting Yuyanjia to make a mistake, and if he makes a mistake, that's where they will capitalize. So it's really unfortunate, but I think that's just eventually what's going to happen. So best case scenario is top esports wins worlds. Everybody gives the credit to everybody but Yuyanjia, unless they're making very good plays throughout the game, throughout the tournament, which is possible. It's certainly possible, but their top esports success is really going to come down to Knight. And also, Jackie Love takes on a lot of the shot calling responsibilities for top esports, according to what most people and analysts say about top esports. So you can't even really lean on that old adage for support players, which is they're generally the shot caller. Next up, we have Life. Life is another generic support player. Plays most of the same champions. We have gotten a Galio game, we've gotten a Volibear game, a Rumble game, which is something we also saw Smeb pull out when he filled in as support. I don't have a great feel for Life as a player separate from Ruler. So the fact that you're playing with Ruler, who is regarded as one of the best AD carries in the world, makes it seem like you probably aren't the reason your bot lane is successful. Maybe that's unfair, but it's really difficult to judge Life in a vacuum when Life isn't often making incredible plays outside of doing his job, which is initiating team fights a lot of the time. Core JJ is in the A tier. I think it was very close to the B tier for me. I know that Core JJ was the MVP for the regular season. I think Core JJ is a previous world champion, understands the game extremely well, and that's really what was the separation between A and B. I just think that Core JJ right now is not as good as the S tier supports, and also I don't expect Team Liquid to perform very well at the World Championship, which is unfortunately baked into how this plays out, because they go hand in hand. I don't think Team Liquid will do well because they're not as talented as other teams, and I think they're not as talented as other teams because I don't expect them to do well. So it's kind of it feeds into itself, but I cannot think about it any other way. Otherwise, I'd be lying to you. Next up, we have Kaiser. Kaiser, I think, has looked very good. Is often playing in team fights is a strong team fighter with Carzzy. Carzzy plays a lot of Senna, which puts a lot of additional burden on to Kaiser to utilize the gold that he's able to get when they're playing fasting Senna. So supports who play with Senna will often look better, and I'll give them more credit because they're asked to do more because they are receiving a larger percentage of the gold on their team. So when we look at these like support Wukong games, that's really where you see that come through. I could easily hear arguments saying that Kaiser is not a difference maker, should be in the B tier. But the number of different champions and the fact that they play fasting Senna or played fasting Senna is a benefit in my opinion. So I have to put him there. Mickey X, another good support player. When G2 is good, a lot of it has to do with Mickey X and Mickey's ability to play as a part of the vision game with Jankos. I think they're kind of inseparable from one another. I think that Jankos isn't going to be as good as a lot of the junglers here because of champion pool problems and stylistic differences with the carry junglers that should perform well at the World Championship. So I am pretty afraid of that. Also, Perks has been playing very poorly. And that isn't necessarily Mickey's fault, but he hasn't done enough to help Perks out of that slump. So that's kind of scary for me. The last support we need to talk about is Beryl. Before we get into the S tier, Beryl and Ghost, they might be the best Senna bot lane at the World Championship. It's not clear how good Senna will be at Worlds because she has received a nerf recently, so it might turn into a fasting Senna situation, and if it is fasting Senna, Beryl will be even more important because they could transition into fasting Senna games, which will allow Nogri to play hard carry champions. It will give additional tankiness to the support. It'll allow Canyon to play whatever Canyon wants to play, and it'll give Showmaker the ability to play hard carry champions as well, because they'll be receiving support literally from the support player, but also from the AD carry. So Beryl's ability to fill that role is an additional benefit for their team. The three best supports at the World Championship, in my opinion, are Sword Art, Lumo, and Keria. And just like in the top video, it is for different reasons. So Sword Art is considered one of the better Thresh players in the world. We saw Sword Art when they were playing from one of the lower regions back in the day. I think the LMS is what it used to be called. Sword Art was a big reason why they were able to be successful. So like it was Flash Wolves with Betty and Karsa, I believe. And Sword Art was really the primary shot caller and has consistently shown not only the ability to make plays, but the willingness to make plays. And there is a difference there because anybody could theoretically pick up a champion and just go into the game and have chances to make plays, but not really capitalize on them because they're afraid. Sword Art doesn't appear to be afraid at any point in any game. They have a ton of experience against the top teams in the world, and for that reason, I think that Sword Art will not crack under pressure. If Sword Art is able to help Huanfeng in the early game and mid game, I really think that the upside for Suning is contesting the world champion. I'm not convinced that they have the ability to win the world championship, but I hope that they convince me otherwise throughout the tournament, and eventually maybe I do start saying that I think Suning can actually win, and then they break my heart, but that'd be fine because at least I'd go through that process. Next up we have Lumo. Oh, well, actually, before we move on, so Sword Art also picked up Bard into his champion pool and showed that they were one of the better Bard players in China as well. And I think that with Thresh and Bard, it's going to be difficult to get Sword Art into a bad matchup And if you are banning out Thresh and Bard, that's good for the rest of the team. So that's good in two different ways. Next up, we have Lumo. And the reason Lumo needs to be here is because his team depends on him to make a lot of plays, a lot of initiations. If we look at the champion pool, it will show Bard as being one of the most important champions, 9-2 in summer. And that's, of course, after the spring playoffs where in like the deciding game, they had the Lumo had the 5-person Bard ultimate, which it is partially lucky, but Lumo was looking to make that play and was able to execute in like the most stressful situation possible. So that was pretty awesome. It's kind of like a LeBron James chase down dunk or chase down block. That's like the level of play that he made. It doesn't mean that he always makes those plays in every single game and we should come to expect it, but it's just a great boon to his confidence, I'm sure. So that's basically it for Lumo. I think Lumo's probably the best Bard player at the World Championship. There are a lot of good Bard players, which is important. So I think we will have it be a contested pick, and it's going to impact the pick ban phase a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of teams decided to ban it, especially if they plan on going after early Rift Heralds, because Bard is good at stopping that as well. And last up, we have Keria. Keria is the best support player in the world, in my opinion, right now. The reason why DRX has been struggling is because of Deft, not Keria. If DRX is able to make a run through this tournament, it will most likely be because of Keria outperforming other supports. So when I think of Keria, I think specifically of Pyke. Keria is thought of as probably the best support Pyke in professional League of Legends. It doesn't get it often because people know how good it is. Keria can also play the fasting Senna, the support in a fasting Senna lane, so that's very important as well. And Keria is only 17, so I think that this is really going to be the beginning of something. It will be tough because Deft has been underperforming for the past probably 2 months or so, and then it came out that Deft was having some back issues, which sucks. I know the feeling. But I think that DRX can surprise a lot of people. The easy thing to say is like, oh well, they lost in playoffs, but I mean, if that's how you're going to decide which teams will win future games, then I can't help you. You're watching the wrong channel, because I will never think like that, and I will never give those kinds of reasons for the teams that I like. It really comes down to talent, champion pools, and I guess that's why people keep coming back. So that's it for the support tier list. Like I said, I think that the 3 best supports at the World Championship are Keria, Lumo, and Sword Art. I expect them to be the biggest contributors to their teams in terms of creating the winning difference, which is like helping create the plays to get a gold lead that they can snowball. Shot calling effectively, setting up vision, and being able to execute plays when they need to be made. And I know it's difficult to measure a lot of those things, and it will eventually just look like results-oriented thinking. So if they perform well, they will look like they played well. But there are other things to consider, like, did they have an impact in pick ban? Were other teams forced to ban out their champions? Those are other ways to help your team get an edge, is because, like, if you force the other team to ban away some champions or waste certain bans, then you're helping. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.